I've lived alone on this farmhouse for 12 years now, ever since my husband disappeared. Winter in Iowa gets so cold it feels like the wind can cut through skin. But the real cold is standing in the same old kitchen and realizing no one will ever call your name from the next room again. Lately, my grandson, Caleb, has been pushing me to sell the land, saying, "Grandma, you're old. Living alone isn't safe." I was ready to believe him. Until one afternoon, a stranger knocked on my door, looked me dead in the eye, and whispered, "Ma'am, your land is worth killing for." Then he pressed an old yellowed map into my hand, circled in red right beneath my barn. "My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 66 years old. I'm not young anymore, no, but I'm not so far gone that I don't know what I'm signing." The Harper farm sits at the edge of a small town where people still use middle names and gossip travels faster than snowfall. My house is old, smells like pine and wood smoke. The barn, our barn, was the one thing Mark loved like it had a heartbeat. He used to say, "A barn is the backbone of a farm." I didn't always understand what he meant, but I remember the way he'd lay his hand on those beams like he was resting it on a friend's shoulder. Mark was gone on a hailstorm night 12 years ago. His truck slid into the drainage ditch. They found the truck. They found skid marks. They found his coat. But they never found Mark. No body, no real funeral. Just questions that froze inside my chest and stayed there. I kept living. I had to because of Caleb. Caleb is my grandson. He calls me Grandma the way a child calls home. No hesitation. I'm not his mother's mother, technically. My daughter Lily passed away young. I took Caleb in when he was 9. I sat outside exam rooms when he had a fever. I patched his jeans. I saved spare change in a jar so he could have new cleats for baseball. I believed love, steady and stubborn, could keep a person anchored. Maybe I was wrong. About 3 months ago, Caleb started coming by more often. At first, I was happy. I made chicken soup. I baked cornbread. I kept the living room warm for him. He'd sit across from me, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed somewhere that wasn't my face. "Grandma," he said one day, "you should sell the farm." I gave a small laugh. I honestly thought he was joking. "Sell it for what?" "The land's worth a lot right now. You could move into town, closer to everything. Someone could check on you. It'd be safer." I looked out the window. A thin layer of snow lay over the fence line. The old trees stood out there like tired soldiers. "I've lived here a long time," I said. "I'm used to it." Caleb let out a long breath, the kind of breath you take when you've already rehearsed the conversation. "Living alone isn't safe. Last week you almost slipped on the porch." I went quiet. I had nearly slipped, but anyone can slip. A week later, he brought his wife, Mara. Young woman. Blonde hair. Perfume sweet like candy. The kind of smile that appears at the right moments, like it's been timed. "Mrs. Harper," she said, laying her hand over mine in a warm, gentle clamp. "We're worried about you. You deserve to rest. You don't have to be strong all the time." I hated the way she said strong. Like strength was something I was pretending to have. They brought paperwork. Caleb said it was temporary, just a simple power of attorney so they could handle taxes and insurance for me more easily. I stared at the dense paragraphs, the tiny print that made my eyes ache. "Just sign," Mara said softly. "Sloan drafted it. It's standard." I looked up. "Sloan?" "Attorney Sloan," Caleb answered too quickly. "He's well known around here. He's helped the family before." There was a lawyer named Sloan, yes. Years ago, he'd handled something for Mark. But I remembered Mark didn't like him. Mark once told me, "That man talks like honey, but his hands are always on somebody else's wallet." I set the pen down. "I want to read it." Caleb's brow tightened. "Why? You don't trust me?" I didn't know what to say to that. I only knew if I signed without understanding, I could lose everything. I carried the papers into the bedroom, turned on a brighter lamp, put on my glasses, and read, line by line. Then I saw it, one sentence that turned my stomach to ice. "The agent shall have authority to dispose of assets, including but not limited to sale, transfer." I walked back out with the papers trembling in my hand. "This isn't for taxes," I said. "This is giving you the power to sell my land." Mara smiled. It was still nice, but her eyes had turned hard. That's just boilerplate language, don't worry. No, I said. I'm not signing. Caleb shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped. What is wrong with you? I'm trying to help. I stared at my grandson. Helping doesn't require me to sign something I don't understand. Mara tilted her head, voice dripping with careful patience. Evelyn, you're worrying too much. And lately you've been forgetting things. You left the stove on the other day. You called me by the wrong name. My cheeks burned. Yes, I'd forgotten a few things. What 66-year-old hasn't? But the way she said it made me feel like a malfunctioning appliance. Caleb's voice dropped, sharp around the edges. Grandma, don't make this difficult. You can't handle everything forever. I heard the real meaning beneath his words. You're not allowed to say no. They left, and the house felt heavier after they were gone. Not quiet, heavy. 2 days later, I got a letter from a real estate company offering a price so high I read it 3 times. I'm not naive. When an offer is too high, it usually means one of 2 things. There's a trap, or there's something under the ground that's worth more than the ground itself. That afternoon, snow fell thick. I was at the sink doing dishes when I heard a knock at the door, not Caleb's knock. This one was slow, firm, like someone rapping on a coffin lid. I opened up. A man stood on my porch, maybe 50, bundled in a heavy coat, cap pulled low. His face was pale. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept. He looked over my shoulder into the house as if checking whether I was alone. Are you Evelyn Harper? He asked. I am. He swallowed hard. My name is Grant Red. I don't have much time. Ma'am, your land is worth killing for. My heart dropped. I honestly thought I'd misheard. But he said it like a fact, not a rumor. He pulled an old map from inside his coat. Yellowed paper, frayed corners. There were hand-drawn lines, symbols, and a red circle. Right beneath my barn. There's something under that barn, he said. They want you to sell so they can get to it. Don't sign anything. Tonight, 11:17, if your phone rings, you answer it. And don't tell your family. Why? I whispered. His eyes held mine, and for a second I saw guilt there. Regret. Because your family, he said, might be working with them. I wanted to laugh to tell him he was crazy, but my throat wouldn't let the sound out. He pressed the map into my hand. His fingers were ice cold. Then he turned and walked quickly down the steps, vanishing into the snowfall. I stood there a long time, holding that map like I was holding a knife. Before I could even breathe, the kitchen phone rang. Caleb. Grandma, he said, way too cheerful. Tomorrow we sign the papers, okay? I already scheduled it with Attorney Sloan. Don't worry, I've got everything handled. I stared out the window. The barn was a shadow in the snow. That red circle on the map looked like a bloodstain. Caleb, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, you want to sell this land that badly? He paused for a split second, then laughed. What kind of question is that? We're doing it for you. You trust me, right? I closed my eyes. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to. But in my ear, Grant's warning rang like a bell. Don't tell your family. So I only said, let me think. Caleb exhaled hard. Don't drag this out. Opportunities don't wait. I hung up and sat down. The map was open on my table. I stared at the red circle until my hands started to shake. That night, I couldn't eat. I paced the house, checked the locks, pulled the curtains closed. I even laughed at myself. Evelyn, you're getting old. Why are you letting a stranger scare you? But Mark used to say, never ignore your gut, it's survival. The clock ticked. 11:10, 11:15, 11:16, 11:17. The phone rang. I jerked like someone had yanked my shoulder. I grabbed the receiver so fast I nearly dropped it. Evelyn, a man's voice said, low, quick. It sounded distorted, like it was passing through something. But underneath that distortion, there was a rhythm to it that hit me right in the chest, the way Mark used to speak when he was tired. Who is this? I whispered. No time. They're building a case to take your rights. Don't trust Sheriff Dalton. Don't sign anything. There's a way down under your barn, Third post on the left. The truth is buried. A ragged breath, then the line went dead. I stood there, frozen. The truth is buried. That phrase hit me like Mark's hand on my back. Mark spoke in plain words that carried weight, like he knew the world was full of hidden things. I didn't sleep. I pulled on my coat, grabbed a flashlight, and went out to the barn. Snow was deep. Wind slapped my face. The barn looked like a giant animal crouched in the dark. I forced the door open. The hinges squealed like they were complaining. The smell of damp wood, old hay, and motor oil wrapped around me. I swung my flashlight up the beams. Third post on the left. I counted. 1, 2, 3. At the base of that post, the dirt looked disturbed. Not a mouse hole, not a critter. A shovel. I knelt, pressed my fingers into it. The soil was still soft. Someone had been digging under my barn, recently. The wind hissed through cracks in the boards. But through that sound, I heard something else. Footsteps. I whipped around. My flashlight shook in my grip. In the doorway, there was a figure. And for one terrifying second, that silhouette looked so much like Mark that my knees nearly gave out. My voice broke. Mark? The figure didn't rush in. He just stood there like he didn't want to scare me. My flashlight caught his face. Not Mark, not possible. But his eyes were the kind of eyes that had looked into storms and understood them. Mrs. Harper, he said calmly. I'm sorry, I'm not Mark. I exhaled like I'd been held underwater. Relief and grief colliding. Who are you? I asked. He stepped inside, both hands raised. Empty. My name is Agent Ana Rivera, federal investigator. I gave a humorless laugh. Federal? Here? On my farm? Rivera looked around the barn, his gaze stopping on the fresh dirt. We've been tracking a criminal operation for a long time. And your husband was a source. My heart clenched. He's alive? Rivera's expression tightened. His voice slowed like he was choosing each word. Mark Harper is gone. I'm very sorry. I grabbed the post to keep from falling. I'd lived with not knowing, but hearing he's gone out loud still felt like someone driving a new nail into old wood. Rivera pulled a thin envelope from his jacket. Mark left this in case you were ever pressured to sell. I took it with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, handwriting so familiar it hurt. Mark's handwriting. Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means they've pushed you into a corner. I'm sorry I left you alone for so long, but you have to trust me. You're not crazy. You're not confused. They want what's under the barn. Don't sell. Don't trust Dalton. Look under the lilac by the old well. The truth is buried there. I love you. Mark, I pressed that paper to my chest like it could hold me together. Rivera, I rasped. Why was Mark involved in this? Rivera held my gaze. The tunnel. There's an old underground system beneath your barn. It was used during Prohibition, bootlegging routes. Later, a drug ring started using it again to move and store product. Mark discovered it. He reported it. And they didn't let him live with that knowledge. I shut my eyes. I pictured Mark stepping into the barn at night, hearing something, seeing fresh marks in the dirt, then refusing to stay quiet. Mark never could watch something wrong and turn away. I opened my eyes. And Caleb? My grandson? Rivera didn't answer right away. He looked down at the floor like he hated what he was about to say. Caleb, he said finally, accepted money from a land investment group. It's a front. They need you to sign the sale so they can access the tunnel legally and tear things up without questions. I shook my head hard, like I could shake the words off. No, Caleb is the boy I raised. He wouldn't. Do you want to see proof? Rivera asked gently. He showed me a photo of a deposit agreement. Caleb's signature, a number, and a line that read like a death sentence. Remaining balance upon completion of transfer. My vision blurred. Part of me wanted to say that wasn't his signature, but I knew his signature. I'd seen it on school forms, medical forms, loan paperwork. Rivera's voice softened. Mrs. Harper, we need your help. But first, we need to protect you. I swallowed. Guardianship. Rivera nodded. They'll use it to take your rights. It's a legal way to steal. My anger burned hot enough to steady my hands. I'm not a child. I'm not crazy. I know, Rivera said. But the court needs documentation that you're competent. And we need evidence of the crime. Mark wrote, under the lilac, as we can go now. I glanced toward the barn door. Snow fell. The town slept. Somewhere out there, a trap was tightening. I'm coming, I said. We moved quietly across the yard. Rivera walked like someone used to darkness. I followed, heart pounding. Afraid, yes, but also feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that Mark's death wasn't meaningless. Hope that I wasn't imagining things. The lilac bush by the old well stood bare in the winter, branches like bones. Mark planted it our first year here. He said lilacs smelled like memory. Rivera knelt and used a small tool to dig. I knelt too, brushing snow aside with my gloved hands. The ground was cold, stubborn. But under that hard dirt was something softer, an oilcloth wrap. Rivera pulled up a black waterproof case. He opened it. Inside, a USB drive, a small notebook, and a silver ring. Mark's wedding band. My throat closed and tears spilled over. Silent, hot, not dramatic, just the body remembering how to grieve. Rivera flipped through the notebook. Mark had written dates, times, license plate numbers, names I didn't recognize, and one name I did, Dalton. There was a page about Caleb. Mark had written, Caleb is being pulled in. He's in debt. He's scared. But if he keeps going, he'll kill Evelyn. I clutched Mark's ring like it was the last solid thing in my life. Rivera plugged the USB into a small device. A shaky video played. The barn at night, flashlight beams, men talking. One tall man in a cap passed an envelope to another. The second man turned slightly. That mustache, that walk. Sheriff Dalton. My blood went cold. Dalton was the one who shook hands at church, who lifted kids onto his shoulders at the fair, who told everyone, don't worry, we'll keep you safe. Safe for who? Rivera turned off the device. Now you see why I told you not to trust him. I nodded, barely able to speak. And Grant? The man who brought the map? Rivera scanned the yard. Grant Red used to work for them. He helped dig. Then he got scared and ran. Mark reached out to him for the tunnel layout. Grant is trying to make it right. I remembered Grant saying, I don't have much time. Maybe he was being hunted. Rivera's tone sharpened, urgent. Mrs. Harper, tomorrow Caleb will bring you to Sloan again. They'll try to force your signature. If you resist, they'll speed up the guardianship filing, but if you follow our plan, we can catch them in the act. What do I do? I asked. Rivera looked at me steadily. You have to play the role they've assigned you. A scared old woman, I said bitterly. Rivera didn't flinch. Yes, for now, but this time you decide when you're weak and when you're strong. I nodded. Inside me was a storm. Grief for Mark, rage at Caleb, fear of Dalton, and a hard stone of resolve. We went back inside. Rivera left through the back like a shadow. I hid the box under the kitchen sink, where Mark used to stash loose change. I washed my face and stared into the mirror. An older woman with red eyes, but there was fire behind them. The next morning, Caleb arrived with coffee and a smile. Grandma, he said, today we sign, and it's done. You'll feel so much better. I looked at him. I saw the boy who once fell asleep against my shoulder, now standing in my doorway with something hungry and frantic in his eyes. All right, I said softly. I'll go. Relief flashed across his face. Mara stepped in behind him, holding pastries, voice sugary. Good, we knew you'd understand. I slipped the small recorder Rivera gave me into my coat pocket. Rivera had also arranged a listening device on my phone line. Caleb drove. Mara sat up front, turning back now and then with her practiced concern. We'll take such good care of you. I watched the barn shrink behind us through the window. Mark, don't worry, I'm not gone yet. Attorney Sloan's office was on Main Street next to the florist and the barber shop. Sloan greeted us with a firm handshake and a wide smile. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "so good to see you. Let's keep this neat and smooth." Neat and smooth. I hated those words. They always meant be quiet. He spread papers out. Purchase agreement, deed transfer, power of attorney. I pretended my vision blurred. "What's this one?" Mara cut in. "Just sign, Grandma. Don't wear yourself out." Sloan chuckled. "Exactly." I took the pen, made my hand shake on purpose. I looked at Caleb. "You're sure?" Caleb wouldn't meet my eyes. "Yes." I lowered the pen, hesitated. "But I want to go to the barn one last time before I sign. I want to touch the beams Mark built. I want to say goodbye." Mara sighed, irritated. "Grandma, we're busy." Sloan frowned but kept his voice mild. "I think we can give her the afternoon. We can sign tomorrow." Caleb's irritation slipped out. "No, they said it has to be today." "They?" I asked, playing dumb. Caleb froze. "I mean," he swallowed. "The company. They're on a schedule." Sloan shot him a look, but I'd heard enough. I nodded. "Fine. This afternoon, the barn, then I sign?" Mara's eyes narrowed. "Don't try anything." I lowered my head. "I'm old. I just want to say goodbye." Sloan agreed because he thought I was just sentimental. He didn't know I was setting a trap. On the drive home, Caleb was quiet. I watched his hands on the steering wheel. His index finger had a faint blue smudge, like he'd just signed something. I wanted to ask, "What did you sign already?" But I didn't. I let the trap tighten on its own. That afternoon they came back. Caleb, Mara, and this time 2 unfamiliar men in dark coats and low caps. And Sheriff Dalton. Dalton stepped into my house with a friendly grin. "Evelyn, I hear you're selling. Congratulations." My throat tightened, but I smiled faintly. "Thank you, Sheriff." Dalton's eyes slid toward the barn outside my window. "Living alone out here? It's a lot. Moving into town is the right choice." Mara chirped. "Sheriff's here to witness everything. Keep it safe." Safe? I wanted to laugh. I only nodded. Caleb put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's go to the barn, Grandma." I grabbed my coat and flashlight out of habit and stepped outside first. They followed. The barn door groaned as I opened it. Inside it was dim. I flipped on the hanging light. Weak yellow glow revealed the posts, the ropes, the tools Mark left behind. Caleb walked in, eyes scanning like he was looking for a specific spot. The 2 men lingered near the sides. Dalton stayed closer to the doorway, one hand near his belt. Mara's voice turned cold. "Mrs. Harper, sign quickly. Don't make this dramatic." I turned to Caleb. "Do you really want this?" Caleb's eyes flickered with guilt. But guilt doesn't stop someone from doing something terrible. It only makes them hate themselves afterward. "Grandma," he said, voice rough, "I don't have a choice." "Yes," I said slowly. "You always have a choice." Dalton stepped forward. His voice wasn't friendly anymore. "Evelyn, don't be difficult. This is for your own good." I gave a small, bitter smile. "My good? Or yours?" Dalton's face darkened. "What did you say?" I kept my eyes steady. Above us, a tiny camera Rivera had hidden on a beam recorded everything. In my pocket, the recorder was running. I took a long breath like I was inhaling the whole life I'd lived. "Caleb," I said, "how much did they pay you?" Caleb startled. Mara snapped, "She's talking nonsense." But Caleb's face flushed. "Grandma, who have you been listening to?" "Answer me," I said, my voice still calm but each word landing like a hammer. "How much did you take to sell me?" Caleb glanced at Dalton, then at the 2 men. Then he looked at me. His eyes filled. I'm in debt. They said if you signed, everything would be finished. I could pay it off. I could move you somewhere nicer." I nodded once. "And if I don't sign?" Caleb went silent. Mara answered for him, sharp as a blade. "Then you won't have the right to refuse." "Guardianship, do you understand?" I turned to Mara, really looked at her. "You say that word too easily." She shrugged. You're old. You don't understand finances. You're clinging to land because of feelings. You're not useful anymore. Useful. That word froze me from the inside. I remembered nights sitting beside Caleb's bed when he was sick. Being useful then. Dalton stepped closer, voice rough. Enough. Sign. One of the men opened a briefcase, pulled out papers and a pen, shoved them toward my hand. Sign it, old lady. I looked down at the document. Full transfer. The company name. The amount. I picked up the pen. I let my hand tremble. I let them think I was folding. Then I set the pen down. No, I said. Dalton cursed and lunged for my wrist. And at that exact moment, the barn door flew open. Blinding white flashlights poured in. Boots thundered. FBI, don't move! Rivera stepped inside in a dark jacket, badge catching light. 2 other agents behind him. Metal clicked as cuffs snapped open. Dalton froze, face draining white. A second later, he reached for his gun. Rivera's voice cracked like lightning. Dalton, drop it! Agents rushed him. Dalton hit the ground. Cuffs clamped shut. That metallic sound, cold and final, was the sound of justice arriving late, but arriving. Mara screamed, "What are you doing? This is a legal transaction." Rivera turned toward her. "We have your confession on tape. You just admitted intent to abuse guardianship to force a sale, and we have evidence of the underground trafficking operation." The 2 unknown men tried to run. They were tackled and restrained. Caleb stood there like a statue, mouth open, eyes on me like he didn't recognize me. I looked at my grandson and felt something crack inside me. Not like a glass shattering, more like old bone giving way. The thing I'd trusted with my whole heart. Rivera addressed Caleb. "You have the right to remain silent, but if you cooperate, this may be your only chance to reduce your charges." Caleb dropped to his knees. Grandma, I didn't want—" "You did it," I said quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I said it like someone reading the end of a sentence. "You did it." He grabbed at the hem of my coat, sobbing. I was scared. They said if I didn't do it, they'd— "Kill me?" I asked. Caleb couldn't look up. I gently pulled my coat from his grip. "Caleb, I raised you. I loved you, but I'm not dying to protect your sin." Rivera gave a small nod like he respected that. Agents led Mara and the others out. Dalton was dragged away, still swearing. "Evelyn, you'll regret this." I stayed in the barn, staring at that third post on the left. "Mark, do you see? I didn't sell, but it wasn't over." Their last weapon was the court. 2 days later, a summons arrived. An emergency guardianship hearing had been filed by Mara and attorney Sloan. Sloan, the fox, had filed before the arrest, or he had someone file for him. Either way, the paperwork came. That's how systems work. Paper moves faster than truth. Rivera told me, "We'll be there. But you need to be ready to show you're competent." I nodded. I wasn't afraid of court. I was afraid of being looked at like a pitiful old woman and having someone else decide my life for me. On the hearing day, I wore my best coat and combed my hair neatly. I brought evidence: Mark's letter, the notebook, the USB, recent medical documentation, a letter from my doctor stating I had full capacity. I walked into that small-town courtroom where people argued fences and dog bites and divorces. Today, they were trying to decide whether I still deserved to be a person. Mara sat across from me, makeup perfect, eyes reddened on purpose. She looked at me like I was an obstacle. Their attorney, someone younger, said, "Mrs. Harper lives alone, shows signs of paranoia, has been influenced by strangers, refuses reasonable decisions. We fear she is being exploited." I almost laughed. They were right about one thing. Strangers had brought me the truth. The judge asked, "Mrs. Harper, do you understand what this hearing is?" "Yes," I said. "Do you understand what guardianship means?" "Yes. It means someone else gets to make choices for me. It means I'm alive, but treated like I'm not." A murmur moved through the room. The judge studied me longer. "Do you consent?" he asked. "No," I said. Their attorney pressed, "Is it true you received a mysterious phone call and believe your husband sent you a message from somewhere. This was their angle. Make me sound crazy. I looked directly at the judge. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in evidence. Rivera stood and requested permission. Your Honor, we have evidence connected to an active federal investigation that directly relates to the motive behind this guardianship petition. The room went silent. Rivera played the video, Dalton taking the envelope. He played the audio, Mara using guardianship like a weapon. He submitted Mark's notebook, the arrest report. Their attorney went pale. Mara began to shake. The judge stared at Mara. You filed this petition while actively pressuring Mrs. Harper to sell her land, correct? Mara sprang up. No, I was just... Sit down, the judge snapped. You were recorded stating intent to remove her rights so you could force her signature. This isn't protection. This is abuse. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, trying to stay still. But inside my chest, something that had been frozen for years began to thaw, slow and painful and real. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Harper, you've been clear. You understand. You refuse. I am denying this guardianship petition, and I strongly recommend you create a transparent legal plan to prevent future exploitation. I nodded, tears threatening. I didn't want to cry in court, but I also didn't want to pretend I was invincible anymore. Rivera's hand rested gently on my shoulder, steady, grounding. After the hearing, Caleb was taken into custody. Rivera asked me, "Do you want to see him?" I thought all night. I thought about 9-year-old Caleb clinging to me at his mother's funeral. I thought about 26-year-old Caleb trying to sell me. In the end, I said, yes. The jail smelled like metal and disinfectant. Caleb sat behind glass, eyes swollen. Grandma, he said, voice broken. I'm sorry. I looked at him and didn't know whether I felt anger or heartbreak. Maybe both. Caleb, I said slowly, do you remember the day you came to live with me? You asked, are you going to leave me too? Caleb nodded, crying. And I told you, no, I won't leave you. And I kept my promise. My voice tightened. But you left me. He covered his face with his hands. I was trapped. I had debts. I was stupid. Maybe, I said, but you had a choice. You could have told me. You could have asked for help. Instead, you chose silence. You chose money. You chose to let them threaten me. He looked up, eyes raw. Do you hate me? I went quiet. Then I said the truth softly. I love you, but I don't trust you anymore. That sentence hurt more than seeing Dalton in cuffs because Dalton wasn't my blood. Caleb whispered, I'll cooperate. I'll tell them everything. I want to do one thing right. I nodded. Then do it. That's what you can still save. I stood up. Before I left, I placed my hand against the glass. Caleb pressed his hand on the other side. 2 hands that couldn't touch. Sometimes love is like that too, present but separated by what someone chose to do. The room went silent. Rivera played the video, Dalton taking the envelope. He played the audio, Mara using guardianship like a weapon. He submitted Mark's notebook, the arrest report. Their attorney went pale. Mara began to shake. The judge stared at Mara. You filed this petition while actively pressuring Mrs. Harper to sell her land, correct? Mara sprang up. No, I was just... Sit down, the judge snapped. You were recorded stating intent to remove her rights so you could force her signature. This isn't protection. This is abuse. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, trying to stay still. But inside my chest, something that had been frozen for years began to thaw, slow and painful and real. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Harper, you've been clear. You understand? You refuse. I'm denying this guardianship petition, and I strongly recommend you create a transparent legal plan to prevent future exploitation. I nodded, tears threatening. I didn't want to cry in court, but I also didn't want to pretend I was invincible anymore. Rivera's hand rested gently on my shoulder, steady, grounding. After the hearing, Caleb was taken into custody. Rivera asked me, do you want to see him? I thought all night. I thought about 9-year-old Caleb clinging to me at his mother's funeral. I thought about 26-year-old Caleb trying to sell me. In the end, I said, yes. The jail smelled like metal and disinfectant. Caleb sat behind glass, eyes swollen. Grandma, he said, voice broken. I'm sorry. I looked at him and didn't know whether I felt anger or heartbreak. Maybe both. Caleb, I said slowly, do you remember the day you came to live with me? You asked, are you going to leave me too? Caleb nodded, crying. And I told you no, I won't leave you. And I kept my promise. My voice tightened. But you left me. He covered his face with his hands. I was trapped. I had debts. I was stupid. Maybe, I said. But you had a choice. You could have told me. You could have asked for help. Instead, you chose silence. You chose money. You chose to let them threaten me. He looked up, eyes raw. Do you hate me? I went quiet. Then I said the truth, softly. I love you, but I don't trust you anymore. That sentence hurt more than seeing Dalton in cuffs because Dalton wasn't my blood. Caleb whispered, I'll cooperate. I'll tell them everything. I want to do one thing right. I nodded. Then do it. That's what you can still save. I stood up. Before I left, I placed my hand against the glass. Caleb pressed his hand on the other side. Two hands that couldn't touch. Sometimes love is like that too, present but separated by what someone chose to do. The case didn't end in a day. The federal team dug deeper, literally and figuratively. They traced the tunnel. They uncovered storage points. They followed paperwork Dalton and Sloan used to launder money through land investments. My barn became a crime scene. They set up lights, equipment, measuring tools. I stood back and watched, heart aching like I was watching someone cut open my memories. Rivera said, I know this is hard, but you're saving other people too. I nodded. I'd gotten used to losing what I loved, but this time I was choosing the reason. They found the entrance hidden beneath boards and fresh soil, exactly where my fingers had touched. Underneath was an old staircase, damp air, chemical stink. The tunnel was wide enough for a person to walk. There were tracks, small wheels, plastic bins, wooden crates. I didn't want to know what was inside those. I only knew this. For years, there had been a second world beneath my feet. Rivera said, Mark heard things at night. He followed. He documented. And he was killed because he wouldn't stay quiet. I stood there with Mark's ring clenched in my fist. No more maybe. No more what if. Just one bitter truth. Mark died for doing the right thing, and I lived to pay the price of that right thing. Dalton was indicted. Sloan was arrested. Morrow was charged. Conspiracy, coercion, legal abuse. The nice investors were exposed as masks. Our little town made the news. People stared at me in church like I was a headline. Some looked sympathetic. Some looked afraid. Some asked, did you know? Like I was a well that held secrets. I didn't talk much. I was tired. I wanted quiet. But quiet doesn't arrive quickly in a small town, especially when you cost powerful people money and pride. And pride makes people dangerous. One night, a vehicle stopped outside my gate. I peered through the curtain. 2 shadows. I grabbed the phone and called Rivera. Before I could even finish speaking, headlights flared against my windows. A rock shattered the glass. A note was tied to it. I picked it up wearing gloves, heart hammering. It read, "You think you won?" My hands shook. Not because I was scared of dying. I'd been scared enough for one lifetime. They shook because I realized something worse. I had no one in my house anymore. Mark was gone. Caleb was in jail. It was just me and an old farm with a buried darkness. Rivera arrived fast. He checked the property, set additional cameras, gave me an alarm device. He said, "You're not alone." I stared at him. I've been alone a long time. Rivera went quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Mark told me you were stronger than you thought." I gave a small, sad smile. Mark always thought I was strong. Rivera nodded. Because he knew. You just forgot. In the weeks that followed, I did what I hated most. Paperwork. Rivera introduced me to a different attorney, Joyce, a silver-haired woman with a blunt voice and honest eyes. Joyce said, "You need a trust. You need clear medical directives. You need an independent plan so no one can weaponize guardianship against you again. I sat at Joyce's desk and signed things this time only after I understood them. No pressure. No, just keep it smooth. I created a trust to protect the farm. I added clauses. No sale while I'm alive unless I personally authorize it with independent medical and legal review. I appointed a trustee, Hank, an old friend of Mark's from the veterans group, a man who hated dishonesty like he hated hailstorms. I also wrote one more thing, the hardest thing. If Caleb comes home someday, he can live on the land, but he will never control it. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was trying to survive. When the dust settled, I went back to the barn. Parts of the tunnel were sealed with concrete. Rivera told me, "We removed everything. It won't be a target anymore." The barn felt emptier, but it also felt cleaner, like a house after someone finishes clearing out after a funeral. I stood at the third post on the left and laid my palm against the wood. "Mark," I said silently, "you were right. The truth was buried." And I dug it up. Later, the sentencing news came. Mara received a heavy sentence. Sloan lost his license. Dalton went to federal prison. I read the numbers the way you read weather forecasts. Not with satisfaction, just with a strange, quiet feeling of things returning to their proper place. Rivera brought me a copy of Caleb's statement. Caleb named names. He explained the debt, the pressure, the threats. He admitted he'd been cowardly. I read it. I don't forgive easily, but I also don't want to carry hate until I'm old enough to become it. Hate is a weight no one should drag into old age. I went into the yard to the lilac bush. I dug a small hole and placed Mark's ring into a little box. Then I buried it beneath the roots. Not to hide it. To put him where he'd chosen, where memory still has a smell. I covered the soil and smoothed it like smoothing a child's hair. "Rest," I whispered. When the dust settled, I went back to the barn. Parts of the tunnel were sealed with concrete. Rivera told me, "We removed everything. It won't be a target anymore." The barn felt emptier, but it also felt cleaner, like a house after someone finishes clearing out after a funeral. I stood at the third post on the left and laid my palm against the wood. "Mark," I said silently, "you were right. The truth was buried, and I dug it up." Later, the sentencing news came. Mara received a heavy sentence. Sloan lost his license. Dalton went to federal prison. I read the numbers the way you read weather forecasts. Not with satisfaction, just with a strange, quiet feeling of things returning to their proper place. Rivera brought me a copy of Caleb's statement. Caleb named names. He explained the debt, the pressure, the threats. He admitted he'd been cowardly. I read it. I don't forgive easily, but I also don't want to carry hate until I'm old enough to become it. Hate is a weight no one should drag into old age. I went into the yard to the lilac bush. I dug a small hole and placed Mark's ring into a little box. Then I buried it beneath the roots. Not to hide it. To put him where he'd chosen, where memory still has a smell. I covered the soil and smoothed it like smoothing a child's hair. "Rest," I whispered.